welcome back to Bites of History with Irene Walton. I am your host, Irene Walton. Yes, we are in a new space. I did not change my room entirely to completely move somewhere different. I am just house sitting and I wanted to make sure we got this week's episode up. So let's dive into who sponsored this episode and our sources. Today, we are so many wonderful people after that first video podcast came out sent me some coffee money on Venmo, which was so nice. So I want to say thank you to Chris Wino, Zach Davis, Ann Steffen, and Anna QB. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring this episode. I'm thinking I might want to just start a little baby Patreon tier. If you guys want to help sponsor the podcast apps, that would be so nectar. Let me know in the comments down below or in the reviews or in my DMs or some comment of another thing if you would join a Patreon tier for like $2 a month to help support the pod. That would be really fun. Okay, now to thank our sources. Wikipedia.org, which I don't know. Did you guys know that Wikipedia was a .org? I fully had no idea. But anyway, go off. KrispyKreme.ca, MyNewOrleans.com, Delish.com, Mash.com, and rewindandcapture.com. Thank you guys so much for providing all of the information. Let's take a bite out of the history of Krispy Kreme donuts.
Have you ever wondered how it made it to your table? Have you ever wondered how it made it to your shelf? If you love food, then this is the show for you. Bites of History with Irene.
Now, you might already have a memory of Krispy Kreme. If you were lucky enough to grow up by a store that was making donuts fresh every day, you probably can smell it in your memories right now. You can probably feel the donut melting on your tongue, the glaze kind of like crackling in your mouth. Oh my God. I would kill somebody for one right now. I can remember my local Krispy Kreme. It was on Topanga Canyon in Van Owen. And my mom and I would go to the mall a lot just to kind of like waste time, walk around, be in air conditioning because I'm from the valley. It's very hot. When we would be leaving the mall, we would always go the back way to see if the Krispy Kreme Hot Donuts Now light was on because that means that they were making hot, fresh donuts. I can remember walking in when we would see the dough being loaded onto the little like Ferris wheel where it would rise. And then those would get moved and then dropped into the oil. And there would, at a certain like timing point, it would go on to another thing and flip. And so you would see this newly cooked golden brown sauce. Oh my God. I'm like, oh, I think I'm sweating a little. And then, oh my God, when it was done boiling in the oil, it would then go onto a cooling conveyor belt and it would be moved towards the like sexiest, thickest white blanket of frosting glaze that it would be enrobed in. It was called an enrober. It would like fully coat these donuts and the machine was always like caked with glaze. It was so funny. Then you would see these perfectly glazed little donuts like slowly moving out, cooling down a little bit before they were sold to you. Like everybody waited to get their own like fresh, hot dozen of donuts. And it was so worth it every time. I don't know if they still do this, or maybe it was just because I was like a cute little girl and I'd be like, can I have a sample? And then you would, I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it was not just me that had this happen, but you would be like, can I get a sample? And they would just give you a hot, fresh donut for literal free. Like it was so cool and so nice. You also like would get free donuts on your birthday or free donuts on like, if you had an I voted sticker. Like so, they are so lovely and accommodating. And if I can remember correctly, was a donut like 79 cents or like 99 cents? They're 99 cents. They're still $1 somehow. And then you would get your dozen and then my mom and I would probably eat like 3 or 4 just on these 6-minute drive back to my house. They were just perfect. The memories of them, perfect. I love finding this kind of stuff out. So I wanted to know why they're so perfect. Where did it come from? Who invented it? Have they always been popular? What's the word? What's the history of Krispy Kreme? So the origin of Krispy Kreme all starts in 1913, Marshall County, Kentucky, when Vernon Carver Rudolph is born. About 18 years later, when he graduated high school, it's 1931-ish, and he moves to Paducah, Kentucky to live with his uncle. Now, just a couple years after that, in 1933, Vernon's uncle purchases a donut recipe and a donut shop from Joe LeBeau. He's a French federal worker with a knack for baking and a very funny name. So, there is a little bit of controversy around this, if LeBeau was actually who sold it to him, if his name was actually LeBeuf, but in my research, this seemed to be the most consistent story, so we're gonna stick with that. So since this is the Great Depression, it's 1933, people are needing to be a little bit more careful with their money. They try this business out in Nashville, Tennessee, and see how it does there. Now, Vernon's dad, Uncle Rudolph's brother, also comes down to Nashville and tries to help them out. And as cool as that is, Vernon still really wants to own his own donut shop, and it just hasn't happened yet. After a couple of years, Vernon decides, I'm gonna start my own Krispy Kreme. I know what I'm doing. I'm gonna take what I've learned in Tennessee and bring it to Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So on July 13th, 1937, Vernon opens his own Krispy Kreme store, and his dreams come true as well. But of course, not without a little bit of hardship. Using his last $25, he rents a space to start his donut business, and it's kind of more of a wholesale operation at this point. He took what he learned from Tennessee, from his uncle and his dad, and was like, you know what? I know people aren't really buying donuts just like to munch on, so I'm gonna use what I have, sell them to grocery stores, and we'll get started that way. However, since he used his last $25 to rent the space, he had no money to buy ingredients for his donuts. So with one of these grocery stores that he would eventually end up selling to, he gets an advance on ingredients, which he eventually pays back, and everything is fine there. But the first Krispy Kreme donut, as we know it, was made on a loan. So Vernon is doing great. It's 1937, 1938. He's paid off all of his debts, and he's selling his donuts wholesale to local grocery stores, and people are really liking them. But what people are liking even more is the smell that is coming out of this Krispy Kreme wholesale factory. So much so that they say, knock, knock, knock. Hi, Mr. Rudolph. Could we just have one now? I don't want to wait and go to the grocery store to get one of your donuts. I smell it. I see it. I want it. And he says, oh my God, love that. Give me 1 second. Cuts a literal hole in the side of the building, and people start coming up to the window to buy donuts from him directly. So he goes from a wholesale operation to a wholesale and retail operation. What's also so cool about this Krispy Kreme window is people can sort of start to like peer inside. This is a new thing for them. They're seeing their food be made in front of them instead of making it at home or buying it in a grocery store. And it's kind of a big deal. They see that this operation is clean and it's well run, and it makes them like Krispy Kreme even more, which I can't imagine. And as you guys can see from this photo, this looks like when the cronut first happened. Like, this line is around the block. People are waiting for so long to get a hot, fresh donut, and with good reason. They're fantastic, they're consistent, and Rudolph is just running a really solid operation. It's the 1940s now, and Vernon is absolutely crushing this. Everybody loves Krispy Kreme. His lines are around the block. He's opened many more stores. But what he does next is so crucial to 1940s and 50s food Americana. He makes sure that everything is so consistent, so streamlined, and that is priceless. What Vernon does is he creates the Krispy Kreme mix plant. And what this does is sources all of the dry ingredients to create a dry mix that gets sent out to every single location. That way there is not a single inconsistency in any of the donuts at any location. You're gonna have the same exact thing when you go to the first original location and the grand opening of the newest one. Now, the reason this is so important is because, as if you guys know a little bit about history, everything had been pretty up in the air for the past 2 decades. Like, the 20s, 30s, and 40s were a time of a lot of inconsistency, a lot of strife, a lot of sadness, a lot of pain. And so when things start to get streamlined and become really consistent, people love that. They really like knowing that they're going to get the same thing for the same price at different places. We're going to see that when we dive into the White Castle story. We're going to see that when we dive into the Domino's story. All at different points in food history, we see that this need and love for consistency is really special and really important. And it wasn't even just crucial for the consumer to have this consistency. Obviously, it was good that they felt safe and happy and confident in what they were using their money for, but it also saved the business owner a lot of money. And making these efficient kind of changes was making Vernon Rudolph much more money, much more successful, could open more stores, and could give more people donuts, which, what a joy. With that, Vernon Rudolph is thinking, how can I make my operation even more efficient? So what's he do? He hires a team of engineers to create his own Krispy Kreme donut making equipment, which is what we see now whenever we go into a Hot Light store. And by the way, a Hot Light store is any of the stores that say like hot fresh now. Isn't that cute? I never knew that that's what they were called. So over the next 2 or so decades, Vernon Rudolph is doing great. He has his specially made donut equipment that he's created. He has his mixes that he sends out every day. He has consistency in the donut mix bag, I'll tell you what. That's not the only thing he's consistent with. Rudolph wants to make sure that all of his stores look the same. So they're all gonna have a green roof. They're all gonna have a similar layout. They're all going to have things that make the customer feel safe, welcome, and happy. And I, for one, feel very happy anytime I see a Hot Light store with that friggin' light flashing. So we did a good job. The growth of Krispy Kreme because of this continues to be solid, steady, and widespread. In 1973, however, Vernon Rudolph passes away sadly, and a couple years after that, the Beatrice Foods Company purchases Krispy Kreme. So we're at about 1976, and it's doing okay, nothing's too terrible. But 9 years after that, in 1985, a bunch of franchisors decide that they want to buy Krispy Kreme back. Around this time, there are still a lot of Krispy Kreme locations, but they're kind of only in the southeast region of the United States. So they haven't really expanded as much as these franchisors would have liked. So within the next 14 years of the franchisors owning Krispy Kreme, that's when our Hot Light invention, both, why not? That's when the Hot Light invention happens, which is what I've been talking about this whole time, letting customers know that their donuts are hot, fresh, and at 120 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what they are meant to be eaten at. I did not know that until I did this research. Very cool. Thank you so much. So within 14 years, from 1985 to 1999, the franchisors have now expanded Krispy Kreme's locations to both coasts all over the United States. Krispy Kreme has their initial public offering to the stock market the year after that in 2000, and people love it. They go crazy for it, buy a lot of stock, bingo, bango. Krispy Kreme's in business yet again. It was in business the whole time, but that just sounded like the right thing to say. And only a year after that, in 2001, we see Krispy Kreme going international to countries all across the world. Krispy Kreme is now in 31 countries all over the globe, which is so cool that so many people get to enjoy such a delicious little treat. Now, there are two different types of stores. The Hot Light Factory store, which we have mentioned 100 times in this episode, which is where the donuts are actually made and you can buy them fresh right there. And there's also a store type called the Donut Cafe, which is still very fresh donuts. They get delivered twice daily from Hot Light Factory stores, but those are just places that don't have enough space to create the donuts there. So they've figured out a nice little middleman to get us donuts. And thank goodness for that. Now, would I love to tell you what the secret ingredient of a Krispy Kreme donut is? I sure would. However, there's literally no way of knowing. It's one of these super secret recipes that is under lock and key. Only 2 people have the key. The actual written thing is like in a safe in the original Winston-Salem location. So we're never going to know that for sure, which I think is kind of magical. I love things like that where you don't want to recreate it. You want to have the experience of going there. So like, why cut to me making a video of trying to make Krispy Kremes? But it's, you know what I mean? There's some things that are just like sacred and there will never be a perfect way to remake it, and that's okay. It is said that the Krispy Kreme donuts we're eating today, though, are the exact same recipe from the ones that Vernon Rudolph was selling in 1937, which I think is very cool. I love that we're literally taking a bite out of history when we eat a Krispy Kreme donut. Oh, one more thing that's very cute. In 2009, Krispy Kreme entered the Guinness Book of World Records with the largest donut box in the entire world at 19 by 13 feet. This box was an exact replica of their classic dozen box, except this one was filled with 2,700 donuts and weighed 300 pounds. So I will be taking 2 boxes. Krispy Kreme is just a really cute brand that I know brings so many of us comfort. And I think that that's something you can't really put a price on, even if the price is 99 cents. They give free samples. They celebrate silly holidays. You can go in on National Superhero Day and get a free donut. And it's just really sweet. I love that there is a brand that's still around just making one thing really, really well. Sometimes that's all you need. However, if you are wondering why the double K in Krispy Kreme, there's no for sure evidence or answer, but in the rumblings that I have ruffled through, in the rumblings that I don't know, in the research I've done, it's mostly just because it kind of stood out. Like in the 30s and 40s, when you saw this big sign that had 2 large K's on it and it said Krispy Kreme and it was spelled wrong, your interest might be a little more piqued. That is what I found in terms of why it is spelled with K's, but there's no way to be 100% sure. Oh my gosh, thank you guys so much for taking a bite out of history with me this week and learning all about Krispy Kreme donuts. Next week, tune in because we are going to learn all about the secret behind Betty Crocker. Who is she? Is she real? I'll give you a hint. No. Well, I guess you don't have to listen next week. Okay, I will see y'all soon. Thank you for listening and goodbye.